So why do we do pulmonary function test? To diagnose symptomatic patients. Like a patient comes to you and he is having cough and shortness of breath. He is around 40 or 50 years old. He's a smoker. How are you going to investigate him? Because whenever a patient comes to you, you suspect something. A smoker who is 50 years old, he is having cough and shortness of breath. What are you going to suspect? Yes, COPD. And what are you going to do? Most of you are still not awake. Yes, spirometry. Very good. So, to diagnose symptomatic disease. Then, for screening for early asymptomatic disease, it means that someone who is at a risk of developing some lung pathology and he is asymptomatic. So, how do you assess him? You assess him by doing a pulmonary function test. So, any idea who will be at risk of developing a disease? One is a smoker. He is prone to develop COPD. Any other example? Other than smoking? Any other risk factor for pulmonary disease in an asymptomatic patient, in an asymptomatic person who you want to assess? यार ऐसे तो मजा नहीं आएगा अगर रिप्लाईज नहीं आएंगे. Not ARDS sufferers. ARDS patients are very sick. They are in ICU. Very good. Occupational lung disease. Someone, very good. Occupational lung disease. Someone who is working in a coal mine. He is asymptomatic right now. But you want to know that whether he will become symptomatic after some time due to a disease which has not caused symptoms right now. So you are going to do his pulmonary function test every year or every 6 months to know, because he is exposed to a certain risk factor. All right. Honestly, I was very much happy with your class because you people were very interactive. So I think that you should now pull up your socks and थोड़ा सा attentive हो जाएं. Immunosuppressed patient will be at risk of developing certain other disease, certain infections. So a pulmonary function test will not be very helpful over there. Then prognostication of known disease. Say a patient who we have diagnosed as COPD, and we want to assess his pulmonary function test every 6 months to know that whether his FEV1 is deteriorating, because we know that with aging and with risk factor, COPD becomes worse. And with exacerbations also. Exacerbation is the biggest risk factor for deterioration of COPD. All right. Then monitoring response to a treatment. Say a patient who was diagnosed as a case of asthma. His FEV1 was 60% of predicted. You started him on inhaled corticosteroid and long-acting beta-2 agonist, ICS and LABA. Now, after 2 months, you want to know that how much his FEV1 has improved with your treatment. So you are going to repeat his spirometry again. All right? Everyone with me? Okay. Good. Okay. So by pulmonary function test, we can divide patients who have got obstructive lung disease, that is asthma, COPD, restrictive lung disease like interstitial pulmonary fibrosis, like silicosis, like sarcoidosis, then pulmonary vascular diseases like pulmonary artery hypertension, like chronic thromboembolism, and these diseases overlap also. So with the help of pulmonary function test, you can diagnose all these kind of diseases. All right. Then which part of pulmonary system is tested by pulmonary function test? Well, pulmonary function test almost cover all the parts of pulmonary system, like airways, including large airways and small airways, then parenchyma, including interstitium and alveoli, pulmonary vasculature, then pulmonary pump mechanism that consists of diaphragm, chest wall, muscles, and neural control of ventilation. So these are very specialized tests, and there are many tests. The standard PFTs consist of spirometry, which we are going to discuss today. It includes the readings and also a flow volume loop and volume time curve. Then there are lung volumes, which is beyond the scope of today's lecture, and diffusing capacity of carbon monoxide, which we call DLCO. And there are some other specialized tests like arterial blood gases, which I'm sure that you people have studied with Dr. Cecil, I think a week ago. Then there are some tests which are done in exercise, like exercise oximetry, 6-minute walk test, which we have discussed in detail in our lecture of asthma. Then maximum inspiratory and expiratory pressures, which we do for diaphragm. So pulmonary function tests can be done at rest. They can be done during exercise. Then most of these tests are done when the patient is awake. And there are certain tests which are done when the patient is sleeping. All right. Is that clear? So let's move to the topic of today's presentation, that is spirometry. My job today is a bit easier because I have discussed with you people previously about spirometry on 2 occasions, in our COPD lecture as well as in asthma lecture. So today I was expecting that it will be more your call and you people will be leading me. Is that true? So what is spirometry? I'm sure you all have seen a spirometer in your physiology lab. Spirometry is a measure of airflow and lung volumes during the post-expiratory maneuver from full inspiration. And you can see this is a desktop spirometer, this is a mouthpiece, there is a nose clip on the patient. Patient is first told about how to perform test. Mind it, it's not a lab test. So the patient effort is very important and the technician has to stand at the head of the patient and guide him and also encourage him. All right. So the learning objective is understanding the meaning of FEV1, which I'm sure you all know, FVC, FEV1 FVC ratio, the flow volume loop. Be able to use these values during diagnostic evaluation, understand how FEV1 can be used to grade severity of disease. Is everyone awake? I don't see any responses. So it seems very awkward that I am just talking to my laptop, which is not a good feeling. So thank you for replies. Okay, thank you. So why do we do spirometry? To establish a baseline lung function in a disease, in a chronic disease like COPD or in some ILD in this disease. Then to evaluate respiratory symptoms like we have already discussed, someone who is having dyspnea or a chronic cough, to diagnose and differentiate between obstructive and restrictive lung disease. All right. To quantify severity of obstructive and restrictive lung diseases, to monitor effect of therapies, to determine effect of intervention. This all we have already discussed. To evaluate respiratory impairment, to evaluate operative risk. Yes, many patients come to chest OPD to take a general anesthesia fitness. So what we do? We take a history, that is patient symptomatic or not. Then we do a complete general physical and chest examination to see if there are any signs. We check his oxygen saturation. If it's low, we go for arterial blood gases. We do a chest X-ray, all right? And then we do his spirometry. Without spirometry, pre-operative workup is incomplete, all right? And performs circulation related lung diseases, all right? So there are many types of spirometers. Some are handheld, some are on desk, some are very small, and many are portable nowadays, all right? But spirometers used to be like this. I remember that when I was in my second year and we were doing our physiology, or maybe in first year, we were doing our physiology practical. So we had a spirometer like this, a water tub, and then a pulley, graph paper, and the reading used to come over here. But now there are sophisticated machines like these ones. All right, patient takes a deep breath and blows as hard as possible. A nose clip is on the nose, and the recording is done by the machine, and the printout comes from the printer. All right. So now it's time for revision. When we take a breath in and out, this is our tidal volume. All right. It's usually around 500 ml. With each breath, normally we take in 500 ml and we take out 500 ml. If we take a deep breath beyond our tidal volume, this is inspiratory reserve volume. All right. And if we take a breath out forcefully beyond our tidal volume, this is expiratory reserve volume. Okay. And after that also, some air is left inside the lung, which is the residual volume. Okay. So there are 4 volumes: tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, expiratory reserve volume, and volume. So in spirometry, we can see the tidal volume, we can see the inspiratory reserve volume, and even the expiratory reserve volume, but not the residual volume, which is left inside the lung. Okay. Then when we add these volumes, they are called capacities. So there's an inspiratory capacity, which is sum of tidal volume and inspiratory reserve volume. Then functional residual capacity, which is sum of expiratory reserve volume and residual volume. Vital capacity. Vital capacity is the amount of air which can be exhaled after taking a full deep breath. And if it's done, what we call it a forced vital capacity. So it is the combination of tidal volume, inspiratory reserve volume, and expiratory reserve volume. And if we add up all these volumes, this is our total lung capacity. All right. Any problem with these volumes and capacities? Is there any difference between vital capacity and forced vital capacity? If vital capacity is done in a forced maneuver, we call it a forced vital capacity. We can also do a slow vital capacity. We call it SVC. It is not done forcefully. Okay. But vital capacity done forcefully is forced vital capacity. And the reporting of PFT is something like this. What we have to emphasize is on FVC, FEV1, and FEV1 over FVC ratio. This is patient reference. There are no normals. Okay. The reference is according to patient's age, height, gender, ethnicity. All right. Then This is pre-bronchodilator, and the reference is in percentage. Okay, so the reference is forced vital capacity should have been 3.2 liters, but his pre-bronchodilator came out to be 2.3, which is 2% of predicted. All right. Then we gave him bronchodilator. We gave him a salbutamol or albuterol, and after 15 minutes we repeated it. So it became 2.5. It should have been 3.2, the reference, but it was 2.3. That is 72% of the predicted, which is not bad. Then after bronchodilator, it became 2.5. Okay. Respiratory rate in male and female is same. Well, respiratory rate is usually a voluntary thing. All right. So there is no difference between normal respiratory rate in male and female. It's same. But anyone can be tachypnic on condition of his or her lung, and as it is voluntary, so one can just increase it. Okay. Okay. So FVC, then FEV1. It is also in liters. All right. Reference, pre-bronchodilator, percentage of predicted post-bronchodilator, and the increase. All right. Then FEV1 over FVC. That is, nominator is post expiratory volume, and it will not be very small. Okay. But in restrictive airway disease, the volume of air which comes out in first second is small, as well as the volume of air which comes out afterward is also small, because lung parenchyma is less. There's less capacity of the lung. All right. Is that clear? Okay. So this is our tidal volume. All right. Then we start the maneuver and we measure the amount of air that is forcefully exhaled in first second, but the patient keep on exhaling after that also. In a normal person, the FEV1 and FVC are usually not very different. All right. So in a normal person, FE1 is the amount of air which can be exhaled in first second, and FVC is beyond that. This is a flow volume loop. This is our y-axis, x-axis, and this is the expiratory limit. As soon as the patient start exhaling, like the expiratory limb, it comes out like this, and as the air flow down, and here the patient will take, so above the x-axis is expiratory limb and then the inspiratory limb. All right. So this is flow volume loop, and this is volume time curve, that how much air was expired in first second, in second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth. So the patient should be expiring for at least 6 seconds. So values measured by spirometry which are important are FEV1, FVC, and FEV1 over FVC ratio. And also you have to see the flow volume loop. And after that, what you need to do, if there is obstructive airway disease, you have to see the response to bronchodilators. Any problem so far? Yes or no? So we can move ahead. Good. Okay. So %. In restrictive airway disease, the FEV1 is decreased, forced vital capacity is decreased, so ratio is normal or increased. Is that clear? Or should I explain it more? Everyone is clear? Okay. Hope you bear with my writing now. So this is FEV1, all right. This is FVC. This is the ratio. Okay. So this is the first column. This one is predicted. I will write P for predicted. All right. So say for normal F, there is no normal FE1. You predicted. The computer tells you according to age, height, gender, and ethnicity. All right. For this patient, FE1 is predicted FE1 is 4. Predicted FVC is 4 liters. All right. Everyone with me? Now this is, I'll write O for obstructive disease. Okay. So for this patient, FEV1 is decreased, that is 2. FVC is slightly decreased, but we for calculation sake, we will make it normal. And it is usually normal also. It is 4. So what about FEV1 over FVC? It will be, anyone? 2 upon 4? Hurry up. Nominator is 2, denominator is 4. %, very good. .5. Okay. Now this is the restrictive disease. In restrictive disease, what happens? That the capacity of lung is less. So the patient's FEV1 will be reduced. FVC will be also reduced. So what will be the ratio? 2 upon 2. It will be 1. That is 100%. All right. Good. Not normal. Say that it's 1 or 100%. And in obstructive airway disease, it is 0.5 or 50%. So if FE1 over FVC is below 70%, that is an obstructive pattern. And if FE1 over FVC is above 70% with a reduced FVC, it is a restrictive pattern. Is that clear to everyone? Or I should repeat it because this is the most important part. Any doubts? They should be cleared right now. Very good. Okay. So what should we do over here? If a patient who has got obstructive airway disease, now forget this. How to rub it? Okay, just ignore this restrictive pattern, restrictive airway disease. The predicted was 4, all right. Came out to be 2 and ratio 0.5. Now we will give him bronchodilator. And after bronchodilator, we will do reversibility testing. So we give bronchodilator, 200 microgram of salbutamol, and after 15 minutes, we repeat FEV1 and FVC. So if it becomes improved, so this is reversible airway disease, that is asthma. Mind it that a good reversibility to declare someone asthmatic should be 12% and 200 ml. All right. It should increase by 200 ml and also 12%. All right. Is it clear? So we were here. All right. So now coming to this flow volume loop. This is the normal flow volume loop. All right. This is the expiratory limb and this is the inspiratory limb. All right. So if the flow volume loop look like this, it's not, it's a normal flow volume loop. What happens in obstructive airway disease? There is scooping out of expiratory limb. You see the dotted line is the normal flow volume loop, and in obstructive airway disease is usually an expiratory problem. So there's scooping out. So just by looking at this flow volume loop, you can say that the patient has got obstructive airway disease. You can see the difference. Can you appreciate it? Like someone has taken out a scoop out of the expiratory limb. Okay. What happens in restrictive, in severe obstruction? In severe obstruction, it becomes more skewing, and we call it a witch hat appearance. You must have seen a witch hat in cartoon movies. So it looks something like this. All right. So in severe emphysema, you can see a flow volume loop like this. Okay. What happens in restrictive airway disease? This dotted line shows the normal flow volume loop, and this blue line shows the shape is same, but volume is small. So in obstructive airway disease, there's distortion of the shape. But in restrictive airway disease, there is only reduction in the volume. Is this clear? Moving forward. In certain option, we are not talking about but unfortunately, there's a weak correlation between FEV1 and quality of life. And you already know that we don't use FEV1 as a marker of our treatment. What we do, we make a 2x2 table and we categorize patients according to exacerbations and the level of dyspnea. We use MMRC score and we divide patients into A and C, those who are less symptomatic, and the quality of life scoring, and B and D, who are more dyspneic. A and B are having less exacerbation, while C and D have got more exacerbation. I hope you remember that from previous lecture. All right. Assessing response to bronchodilator, we have already discussed that a good response is more than 12% and 200 ml. So, how to prepare patient for spirometry? Patient should avoid smoking for 24 hours, should not have done vigorous exercise for 30 minutes before test, should not be wearing so much tight clothing that he cannot take a deep breath in, should not be have taken food for 2 hours before, because in the forceful maneuver, he can vomit. Okay. If a patient, you need to do a reversibility testing, should not have taken short-acting bronchodilator for 4 to 6 hours, not a long-acting bronchodilator for 12 hours, sustained release bronchodilator for 24 hours. There are certain contraindication, hemoptysis of unknown region, because forceful maneuver can cause more hemoptysis. A pneumothorax can get worse. Unstable angina patient can have a MI. Recent MI is a contraindication. Aneurysms are in contraindication. Recent eye surgeries, some abdominal or thoracic procedures, because patient will not be able to do forceful maneuver. All right. So these are some contraindications. Technique: record patient's age, height, and ethnic origin in your spirometer. So it will give you the predicted value of FEV1 and FVC. And the patient is explained the procedure. The technician show him how to do it. You have to ensure that patient is comfortable. He know the procedure. You have to demonstrate the patient that how to do it correctly, and you have to guide him in between also. Nose clip is attached so that there is no leakage. Patient has to inhale maximally, place mouthpiece and just seal it around the mouth. His lips should be sealed around the mouthpiece, and patient has to blow out as hard as possible and should be at least for 6 seconds. Best 3 readings are recorded. There are the acceptability criteria, which we are going to discuss now. Then it should be reproduced also. It means that 2 readings should not be very far away from each other. Then flow volume loop should be sharp. If a patient has not started test on time, there will be a gap over here. If the patient is not doing a good effort or is coughing in between, it will be wavy. Okay. Then patient might take in a deep breath during the maneuver. You can see that this is not a right graph. It is not a good attempt by the patient. So you are not going to accept these kinds of flow volume loop. All right. If the patient coughs, this will show like a wavy line. There's not a good start. There should be a sharp takeoff like this. Here you can see that there's not a sharp takeoff. And if the patient take a breath or glottis is open, then you can see these lines like this. So you are not going to accept it. After 3 acceptable spirograms have been obtained, what you do is you see that the largest FVC are within 150 ml of each other and the largest FEV1 are within 150 ml of each other. Okay, this we call it as variance. All right. Coughing, if there's coughing in between, because with cough there's large amount of air exhaled, so you are not going to accept it. If there's poor effort, like here you can see that it should have been like this, but it's rounded, so you are not going to accept it. All right, slow start, you are not going to accept it. If the patient takes some inspire in between, you are not going to accept it. Okay. Height, age, gender, and ethnicity affect spirometry results. So they should be measured and should be fed. Common obstructive pulmonary disease are asthma and COPD. Common restrictive diseases are interstitial pulmonary fibrosis. Then there are some diseases like occupational lung diseases like silicosis, pneumoconiosis. All right. Then there are certain miscellaneous groups like sarcoidosis. All right. Then there are many other conditions which are listed over here. They all give you a reading of restrictive airway disease. All right. But you don't have to remember them right now. So what happens in expiratory disease? This is the predicted flow volume loop, and this is the predicted volume time curve. This is the predicted flow volume loop, the dotted line outside. So what happens in severe obstruction? It will be like this. All right. Or here you can see that there is coving of expiratory limb. Then you give bronchodilator to the patient, and after bronchodilator, it will improve like this. Or here you can see the second dotted line, it will improve like this. And if it's very good reversibility, it will touch the normal. All right. So this flow volume loop is very helpful. So this is all about spirometry. I hope that you people have understood it. So are there any questions? I'll be very happy to answer them. And if there are questions related to the previous topics we have discussed and you have gone through it and there are some queries, I'll be happy to answer them also. Thank you. Any questions, any queries?